we get to the second topic here. You put out the question the other day, who is the best freshman in college football this season? I just want to say right now, it's not which freshman is who has had the best season overall. And yes, we include redshirt freshmen in the awards. I just wanted to get that out right away. So our first response, we got a lot of these. This one comes from Royal Flush, who says, Drake Maye is the only correct answer here. I hate UNC, but that's the answer. I don't think it is the only correct answer. So not only did you give your rival some props, but it didn't have to be that way, Royal Flush. What do you think, RJ?
I'm here for Drake Maye is a dude, right? I'm not here for the only correct answer, because Drake Maye did lose to Notre Dame, right? And did not look like he was going to keep the job early on. Like, he felt like, I don't know, perhaps a giraffe on skates back there to start with. And frankly, the offensive line has gotten better. And then he got to have this relationship with Josh Downs. And I think this is really where we could include Phil Longo in the Broyles Award to discussion for what he's been able to do in the development of Drake Maye. Drake Maye is a dude that he wasn't sure was going to be his starter come August. Like, they were really looking at Jacoby Criswell and going, that might be our guy. But Drake has come on in such a fantastic way. He's a top 10 leader in FBS passing. He's throwing all sorts of TDs. I think he had over 500 yards of offense just last week. If they win the ACC championship game, I think it's going to probably end up being him, because he would be the only freshman quarterback with a Power 5 championship underneath his belt. And oh, by the way, doing it over Clemson's dead body and filling in at a spot that has become really important to UNC. Mac Brown said before, Sam Howell is the reason that UNC got off to such a great start to his tenure, because that dude flipped from Florida State. Drake Maye flipped from Alabama to UNC. So it's not as if people did not know about him. It's about whether or not he was going to come through on his talent, and he has in a very real way. I like singling out Drake Maye here. I'm not so certain that it's the only correct answer like you, Tyler.
I agree. Drake Maye has had an incredible season so far, especially in the second half. He looks just like the perfect prototype of what the NFL wants in a modern quarterback these days. But that leads us to our next response. This one comes from Ryan, who, again, is appalled by the question. Ryan says, this is a question, it's Harold Perkins, and it's not close. If all of these aren't close, it doesn't make any sense, because we're getting a bunch of different responses here. But I have to say, last week, Harold Perkins did make me think, maybe it's not that close.
You know, I said after JT Tuimoloau, a.k.a. JT Turnovers, had his outstanding game against Penn State, that he vaulted himself into the discussion for the Bednarik Award, right, for the best defensive player in college football on that one game. And I think, frankly, Harold Perkins did the same thing, because it wasn't LSU that beat Arkansas. If you watch that football game, you know that Harold Perkins beat Arkansas. That man lived in the backfield. One of my favorite plays of the year is Harold Perkins running down one Malik Hornsby at a flat sideline to sideline speed. And Malik Hornsby has legitimate 4.4 speed. Like, he should outrun a guy of Harold Perkins' size. But to see 40 do what he did against Arkansas, you have to just give it up. However, I'm not so insulted by the question, because I'm not sure that you can be the best freshman in college football, or maybe this is completely on brand. Tyler will be able to tell me. If when your head coach says, I know you had the flu earlier this week, but you know what? You remind me of MJ, because he had one of the greatest games in any sport ever of all time while dealing with the flu, to which our man 40, Big Perk 40, said, and I quote, who's MJ? That's a true story, folks. Now, I'm 35 years old. I'm not that old. Tyler, are you that old as to not know that MJ stands for Michael Jordan and the flu game in 96 is ridiculous?
No, I'm not that old. I'm 26. Also, I have a hard time believing this from my old friend Brian Kelly, because The Last Dance took over the sports world during 2020. It was the only sport we had was watching that documentary all about Michael Jordan. So I was surprised, but again, maybe we are just getting old. But it's kind of a scary sight. If Harold Perkins is that young and he's already that talented, it's kind of scary to think about how good he could be in just a couple more years.
Absolutely. And by the way, this is another dude that could have ended up at Texas A&M. Wasn't a sure bet that he was going to be at LSU. And looking at the rundown, I think that's what next on the list for us is we're going to discuss A&M here.
It is. We actually got a response from a player on the current Texas A&M roster. Aki, shout out to you. Thanks for watching the show. Sticking up for his teammate, tagged Evan Stewart, and said, duh, again. It's like all these people are giving us these real easy responses, but I don't know. What do you think about Evan Stewart?
I think Aki riding for his dude is 100% on brand because that's who he is, right? He's going to be a great teammate, and he's the kind of guy that sees this question and says, yeah, I'm going to put my man Evan Stewart on. I think it's pretty outstanding what he's been able to do when he's been on the field, quite honestly. He's had some outstanding games for what has turned out to be an incredibly bad A&M team. And I feel awful for them because I know how talented they are. They can all just pull in the same direction. But I think this is also a great way for us to single out the real dude in the SEC West that everybody should be talking about. And if they aren't already, I think that's Quinshon Judkins. Producer Tyler, is that who we got the most responses for?
Definitely a lot. Harold Perkins and Maye and Judkins, especially with all three of them having huge games last weekend. I thought it was very topical, and for good reason. I mean, Judkins has been amazing. One thing that surprised me today was when I was going back and looking at his recruiting profile. I had heard the name because Notre Dame was interested in him, but he was outside of the top 500 on the 24/7 Sports Composite, and that was a miss. I think it's safe to say he's had an unbelievable year.
Yeah, shout out to A. Hoy, who actually makes it into the show with that response. But I'm with you in that he's already set the school record for rushing TDs in a season. He's got 15, right? To put that in perspective, there's a certain wide receiver named Jalen Hyatt who just set the Tennessee receiving record, I think not against Alabama, but in the game following that, or maybe it was against Alabama, going over 14 TDs, right? So to put that in kind of context for what Quinshon Judkins has done as a true freshman, but also he's not supposed to be the bell cow back. That's supposed to be Zach Evans, and Zach has been hurt, right? It's not because Zach's not good, because anybody that saw Texas Christian play the last year would know that's exactly who Zach is. Extremely good. And if you go back to North Shore, you're really saying, hey, I remember when Zach Evans was a better tailback than Bijan Robinson. And folks, he still might be. That's how good Quinshon Judkins is. Now, to the point about his recruiting, this is fascinating to me because this is exactly what I expected to happen when COVID hit, and it happened for Quinshon Judkins. You don't really get to play a bunch in 2020, right? And you get hurt in 2021. So there are only a few people that know about you, and the ones that do probably have known about you since 8th grade, so they're recruiting you pretty hard, like Auburn did, right? But a team like Alabama probably gets to you a little bit late. And I don't think it's Alabama, but there's at least one school that made him a non-committable offer, which is to say, hey, we want to offer you, but you got to come out to camp and we got to work you out for you to, secure that offer. And you can take that how you want. If that's your dream school, you're probably going to sell out to go earn that offer. And I know many people that did. But Quinshon Judkins looking around and said, why am I going to work out when I got these other offers on the table from places like Clemson, Notre Dame, Auburn, and Ole Miss? And then there's a great photo that I think we're going to show that is just of one Lane Kiffin sitting in the stands by himself, watching Quinshon Judkins play high school football in October of last year. Now, Rich Rodriguez would love me to tell you that Jacksonville State was represented at that game. But that's just another way of underscoring how many other people were just out. They did not know to look for him. And I believe he went for over 200 yards in that game that Lane Kiffin was watching. And then they just recruited him. And that's what it came down to. Ole Miss just outworked everybody else toward the end and was able to get Quinshon Judkins on campus. That is what I expected most recruiting stories to be like. That we haven't seen more recruiting stories like that. It speaks to just how talented the sport is at the high school level, no matter where you look. So does that even pass muster with you, Tyler, in that there are more dudes out there that just didn't get looks? Or do you think everybody that can play eventually gets found out?
No, I don't think they do, to be honest. There's different circumstances based on the state. Like, you could be an awesome football player playing in a state where football isn't as big of a deal as, let's say, Florida, Ohio, Texas. You know the states that I'm talking about here. And I think that there's a lot of players who unfortunately slip through the cracks. But this is a great story. I couldn't believe it. And I know that stars matter in college football. You and I both know that. And a lot of times the star rating is right. It's an accurate representation of how good you are in high school. But sometimes there's guys who just are really good players and didn't get the attention that they deserved in high school. I think Judkins is definitely one of those guys. So it's great to see him have success at this level, and especially this early, because what he's done as a true freshman has been really, really impressive. But that wraps up the responses. Is there anyone that we missed? Any of the fans missed either?
I think there's a few that we could talk about. I want to pick that up, though, on the point of states that are just overlooked. Oklahoma is one of those. I live in that state. We love our high school football. We play pretty damn good high school football. But somehow, Dax Hill ends up in Michigan, and Josh Proctor ends up at Ohio State. And those dudes play high school football down the street from where I'm doing the show right now. So it's not even that some of these kids are overlooked so much as you think that they're local and they'll stay local, and that ain't always the case. Shout out to you, state of Arizona, who has Bijan Robinson at Texas. I think a dude that bears mentioning in this discussion is quite honestly Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle at Texas. Like, to be a true freshman and hold down that position the way that he has, specifically against good football teams like, say, Alabama, that is no mean feat. I don't know of any true freshmen that could pull that one off. And there are some outstandingly talented and gifted true freshman offensive linemen out there. I'm thinking about like a J.C. Latham that probably doesn't crack the Alabama starting line at all as a true freshman. So for him to be able to do that, and for, frankly, Kyle Flood to trust him to do that, I think speaks volumes. But we're going to hear more from other folks about some true freshmen that are getting after it. I think one more that we could talk about is obviously Nick Singleton out of Penn State, right, who's been outstanding for them. And when he's been able to be the bell cow back, he's done a great job. Katron Allen also goes in there. And then for me, right, the last one to mention is Malachi Starks, who a dude that I told everybody I thought was going to be really great when he committed to Georgia, because he can literally do anything you ask him to. He could have played wideout. He could have played tailback. He could have played middle linebacker, but they got him playing safety. And when the ball's in the air, you can understand why Kirby Smart was going, no. I need that guy running backward with Christopher the Peacemaker Smith. Those are my three. Are there any that you want to mention before we get out of here, Producer Tyler?
I'm glad you mentioned Malachi Starks, because I was getting a little worried we were going to go through this segment and not mention him, and I am sure there were some Georgia fans seething, waiting. When are they going to say Malachi Starks? When are they going to say it? And I'm just glad you mentioned him. I'm never going to forget his interception in that season opener against Oregon. When he made that play, I was in such awe, and then I realized he's a true freshman, and I just almost laughed to myself just thinking, man, Georgia, it's different down there right now. They're a machine. They're pumping out these unbelievable prospects, so I'm just glad we got him in too.
I can't wait to see what Georgia becomes in the coming years, because we might just actually see a changing of the guard in a very real way by the end of the season, where Georgia becomes the team that Alabama has been for the past 15 years. That's ridiculous. Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.